What's up, everyone? Welcome back into the channel. So sadly, the Green Bay Packers season is officially over. So that means that it is now the off season for the Green Bay Packers. And now we're going to start to dive into everything off season for this Packers football team. And the very first thing I wanted to dive into is the impending free agents for the Packers in this 2024 offseason, as that's kind of the first thing they have to deal with. They have to see who they might re-sign to this team, whose contract is expiring, who they can let go and replace with potentially another free agent or a draft pick. So this is the first thing I wanted to dive down into of many other things this offseason. And if you do happen to be a new viewer to this channel and want more Packers content throughout this offseason, not only with free agency, but draft, salary cap, which I'll also dive down deep into as well, go down and click that subscribe button. If we can get 750 likes on this video, I will release my first mock draft for the 2024 offseason this week. All right, so without further ado, let's dive down into the impending free agents, whether they're unrestricted, exclusive rights, or restricted free agents for the Green Bay Packers. Before we do so, I want to take a look at their current salary cap, just take a quick peek at that. Now, if you want a full video about their salary cap and breaking it down and what players are potential cuts and what players they could restructure, let me know down below in the comments and I'll make a video on that as well. But right now, the Green Bay Packers have $7,359 in salary cap space, so not much at all. They're right on the line of being negative or over the cap. And in terms of effective cap space, they actually are over the cap by nearly $7 million. Now, that's not going to remain that way. There's a lot of different things that are going to happen this offseason. David Bakhtiari being one of the main ones that could save the Packers a lot of money, but it's a very weird situation. But nonetheless, the Packers can very well have some money to play around with this offseason and potentially bring back some of their impending free agents. So on that note, let's go take a look at them. All right, so now diving down into this list, we see at the top is Darnell Savage, who is an impending free agent for the Green Bay Packers. He is a voided contract. So if we go into the contract, they added void years. That starts this year in 2024. They'll still be paying him $5.45 million out of their salary cap. So even if Darnell Savage walks this free agency and goes somewhere else, the Packers are going to be paying him that amount. So this also tells me that it might be a better idea to get Darnell Savage back in the building, because then they can extend this amount plus whatever they give him for however long they sign him to further out into the future. And I know that's not the best thing to do, keep kicking the can down the road is why the Packers are in this cap situation right now. But Darnell Savage, regardless, they're going to be paying him $5.4 million in 2024. So if you were to sign him to, say, a 1 or 2 year deal, you can maybe, backload that a little bit, add a couple void years, and extend that out a little bit further. Plus, Darnell Savage still only being 26 years old and coming off a very, hot streak towards the back end of the season. Yes, he suffered some injuries this year, but via PFF, this is actually his highest graded season as a Green Bay Packer. And we saw, what he's capable of doing. And I think if the Packers go a different route at defensive coordinator other than Joe Barry, I think a new right defensive coordinator could utilize Darnell Savage the right way, maybe in the star/nickel role. We saw the Packers do that a couple times over his career, and I thought he performed well there. And I think with the correct scheme and a correct defensive coordinator, Darnell Savage could be that nickel guy. The Packers need to address nickel corner star role going into this offseason. I doubt they're just going to run with KeShawn Nixon again in that role. KeShawn Nixon, also an impending free agent, which we'll go over. But Darnell Savage could fill that role, and then also, of course, play some safety, where the Packers are extremely light at going into this offseason. The only safeties under contract for 2024 as of right now is, of course, Anthony Johnson Jr., who they just drafted in the 7th round, and then also Benny Sapp signed through 2024, as well as Zane Anderson, two guys that, really have no starting snaps at safety. Anthony Johnson Jr. even not having that many starting snaps. So the Packers, are losing a lot of snaps to impending free agents at safety with Darnell Savage, Jon Owens, and of course, Rudy Ford. So one of which they might want to bring back, who still shows some promise and, maybe could still continue to grow, is someone like Darnell Savage. Next on this list is KeShawn Nixon, who we just talked about, also has void years in his contract. So looking at his contract, they added 4 void years, but the year they become a free agent is when all that bonus gets attached to. So $1.4 million in dead money or a void year, no matter what, if the Packers re-sign him or not, they're going to be paying that amount. That's not that bad. Now, I'm all for bringing KeShawn Nixon back as cornerback number 4 and kick returner. I think that's about it. And I think if the Packers have an injury at cornerback, yes, he could step in and probably play pretty well. But I don't think you go into 2024 with Nixon as your starting nickel cornerback. I think that was a problem all year. It was a nice experiment, right? He played a couple great games, Kansas City, and then Dallas, but he also had a lot more poor games, a lot more bad games. So inconsistency was a problem for KeShawn Nixon. It was a problem for a lot of defenders on this Packers defense. And I would love him back overall. I think he's a great guy. He's great for the locker room, a great kick returner, an all-pro kick returner, and a great depth corner. But I wouldn't have him starting at nickel going forward. Spot Track has his contract evaluation or his calculated market value at $1.7 million annually. I would be very okay with this amount for, say, another year or 2-year deal. He's going to be 27 in the new league year start. So I think if you were to sign him to like a 2-year, $4 million, $5 million deal, I'm completely okay with that. Next on this list is YHS Nyman, who played 21% of snaps. He's also turning 28 years old. This is someone I think the Packers can let walk. I think another team will just give him more money than he's probably worth. YHS Nyman was a nice depth swing tackle option for this team in the past, but I feel like this year he just got outplayed by a lot of players, right? The emergence of Rasheed Walker makes YHS Nyman expendable, and I think the Packers could simply just draft a tackle in the 4th or 5th round, which they're great at doing, to replace the production that YHS Nyman could give for a lot cheaper. So this is a player I think the Packers let walk, and another team probably signs him as a rotational or even starter tackle. Next on this list is someone who saw a lot of starting snaps in 2023, and that is Jon Runyan at right guard. This is the end of his rookie contract. We can see he was very affordable over the last 4 years, this year still only being a $2.7 million cap hit. Now, I'm kind of conflicted on Jon Runyan. I know this guy wants to be a Packer. He loves the Green Bay Packers, and the last 3 games, he really stepped up. Earlier this season, he was not good at all, and I couldn't wait to see Sean Rhyan. I think if he's cheap here and it's a 1-year prove-it deal, maybe 1 year, $4 million, something of that sort, I'm okay with it. But I want there to be competition at right guard. I don't want it to be, okay, we're re-signing Jon Runyan, right guard is settled, okay? I don't want the Packers to go that route. I would love him here for depth, and if he gets beat out at right guard, great. You have a solid depth guy that can play guard, can play center, and he's a good locker room guy. That's about the extent I'm at with Jon Runyan Jr., but if another team wants to sign him for more money to start at guard for their team, which very well could happen, you let him walk. Next, we have Jon Owens at the safety position, who played 69.8% of snaps. He is 29 years old, and they had him at a pretty cheap contract at $1 million. In my opinion, the Packers should just go a different route at safety. I thought he filled in okay, and I think he's still a good special teamer, and if you want to bring him back for simply a depth safety and a special teamer, that's fine, but I don't think he should be starting in 2024. I think the Packers should attack that safety room the same way they attacked the tight end room last offseason. Maybe draft 2 very early in the 2nd round or 3rd round, or 1st and 3rd round. There's a lot of options there in this upcoming draft at safety in those rounds, so I think the Packers could attack it that way. And unless you can get him back for very low, like a veteran minimum, then I say you let Jon Owens walk this free agency. All right, so I just sorted this by snaps to kind of go over some of the other high snap players here, so we can go over those first. We also have Rudy Ford here, who's going to be 30 years old. The way the Packers stopped using him since he returned from injury, he basically was completely removed off the defense. I don't see the Packers bringing him back. It was a low amount this year at $1.5 million. So maybe if he's that cheap, they bring him back. But again, the same goes for Rudy Ford as it did Jon Owens. I think the Packers rebuild that safety room. He's turning 30. He's 30 years old right now. I just think it's not the best idea to bring back aging veterans that basically got benched in the middle of the season. I didn't agree with the benching. I think Rudy Ford is playing well, and I think he would have played better overall than Jon Owens throughout the year, but he also was hurt, so you can't really, play if you're hurt. But I think the Packers probably let Owens and Ford walk. Then we have A.J. Dillon. This is an interesting one. 26 years old, played nearly 50% of the snaps. We know he's a great locker room guy. Him and Aaron Jones are very tight together, right? And, he could be cheap. And I think if he's cheap, you bring him back as a depth running back. I still think the Packers should draft one in the middle rounds to kind of groom under Aaron Jones, as long as Aaron Jones is returning for 2024. He's under contract, but it's a big one, so we'll dive down into that when we look at the Packers salary cap. But if the Packers can get A.J. Dillon for a pretty cheap deal, his average annual salary calculated market value on Spot Track is $3.5 million. If you could get him for 2 years, $6 million, I think that's a fair deal for A.J. Dillon. I wouldn't give him anything more than 2 years here, but very well another team could go out and try to sign A.J. Dillon for maybe $4 million a year, and at that point, I think you let him walk. Going down this list, Corey Ballentine at cornerback played 43.9% of snaps. That's insane coming from a practice squad call-up. He's 28 years old. I think this is a guy you bring back. This is a guy that had the next man up mentality, and when he got thrown right into the fire, he performed well, in my opinion. Corey Ballentine, a solid special teamer, a solid boundary corner that can be a depth guy. Yeah, you don't want to go into 2024 with him starting outside, but he's a solid corner at depth in case an injury happens or whatnot. I think you bring him back, and I think it would be pretty cheap. So that's where I stand with Corey Ballentine. Then we have Daniel Whelan. It says kicker. Obviously, he's a punter. He's an exclusive rights free agent, so he'll be back. Anything exclusive rights, they'll be back pretty much. And then restricted, of course, they have to put a certain round tender on them. I'm actually going to sort that by that right now. So exclusive rights, we have Daniel Whelan, Emmanuel Wilson, and Caleb Jones. Pretty much all these guys will be back. It's going to be very cheap, and they're not really free agents. As for restricted, you could put a right of first refusal tender on Patrick Taylor and Robert Rochelle if you wanted to. Who knows if the Packers bring either of these guys back? They could very well let them walk. Patrick Taylor's been like a solid special teamer and a call-up at running back, but I think, again, the Packers draft someone, maybe bring back A.J. Dillon, so kind of makes Patrick Taylor expendable there. As for the remaining unrestricted free agents for 2024 for the Packers, one being Josiah DeGuara, I feel like they should just let him walk. The experiment didn't work. The third-round pick didn't work. It seems like the Packers' third-round curse is changing now with Tucker Kraft, Sean Ryan. They have 2 third-round picks this year. They can very much change that curse, and maybe it ends with Josiah DeGuara, but I think you just cut ties there, let him walk. Maybe he signs with another team. You have Eric Wilson here. I think he's an excellent special teamer. I think you bring him back. You need special team guys like that. You have Christian Welch, who's pretty much on the practice squad most of the year. It doesn't really matter too much. And then you have Tyler Davis, who was supposed to be this, great special teamer for the Packers this year, and probably part of the reason why their special teams wasn't as great. He was a good special teamer in 2022, then of course tore his ACL before the season happened. I know the Packers like him a lot. I could see him back for a vet minimum just to have depth in that tight end room if you let DeGuara walk, and of course another special teamer, so long his ACL progression has gone correctly. So those are all the impending free agents for the Green Bay Packers. Nothing too crazy. Like in the previous years, there was some where you're like, wow, the Packers really need to re-sign these guys. But this year, there's only a couple starters. You have Darnell Savage, you have Jon Runyan, and then KeShawn Nixon, really the only starters that are impending free agents. And honestly, you could probably go, well, the Packers don't need to bring back any of those guys. They could bring in new talent through the draft, through free agency and whatnot, and probably replace the same thing they gave to this team. So the Packers very well could let all these guys walk that are unrestricted free agents and probably replace them. Will they do that? Probably not. I think they do bring back a couple of these, such as Darnell Savage, maybe Nixon, maybe A.J. Dillon. We'll see how it goes. The Packers obviously need to figure out other salary cap issues in order to bring some of these guys back. So again, if you want to see that video going over the salary cap right now, leave a comment down below. But that about does it for this video. I appreciate you guys coming by, checking out the impending free agents for the Green Bay Packers. Again, all off-season content for the Green Bay Packers will be here right on this channel, so go down and click subscribe. But that about does it for this one. I appreciate you coming by, and as always, go Pack Go.